Entity 303, one of the most feared yet mysterious beings in Minecraft. It's known for being a ghostly figure that haunts your worlds and corrupts them. So join me as we dive deep into the story of Entity 303. Long ago, the Minecraft universe was empty. There was no overworld, no nether, no end. Nothing existed back then. And it was like that for trillions of years. Until at one moment, the first ancestral spirit was born. This was the first god of Minecraft. And so this spirit, not wanting to forever drift in a vast pool of emptiness, created the first world. This world was very simple at first, with just a flat area of stone and a breathable sky. It was a place with endless possibilities for the future. However, it was mostly dead. So, not wanting to be lonely, that spirit created the first very primitive forms of life, which came in the form of the grass, trees, and chickens. But even with these new life forms to play around with, the spirit was still very lonely, as he couldn't really interact with his creations without causing their minds to explode because of their inability to comprehend the spirit. And so, as a solution for that, the spirit created other spirits in order to help him with his world creation efforts, but also to keep him company. And so those new spirits helped with the development of that world, and soon they even created their own new worlds linked to the first. And so that's how the Minecraft universe was created. And once all the dimensions that the spirits could possibly think of had been created, they stopped creating new worlds, and they began focusing on the protection and preservation of life within those worlds. But when you have hundreds of godlike beings with endless powers over the worlds that they govern, there must be at least one that isn't so selfless to their creation. And so is the story of Spirit 303. Spirit 303 was just like all other spirits. However, this spirit was made to look after a distant world that no one cared about and barely had any life to keep thriving. And as such, he really didn't care for that world that he was meant to govern. And he had other ambitions. Mainly, he wanted to be the ruler of all the other spirits, and thus the ruler of the entire Minecraft universe. But he wouldn't be able to do that alone, as he needed the power of at least two spirits in order to overpower all of them. And so he came up with an idea. He would kill one of the spirits, one that basically no one cared about, and he would take their power. And then after that, he would progress to all the other spirits, killing them. And then, over time, he would become the ruler of the gods. It was a simple plan, but he was hoping it would work. And so, during the dead of one night, he snuck up and tried to kill that spirit. And he failed, because you can't just kill a god like that. And so, Spirit 303 was taken to the other spirits, and he was judged for his crimes. His punishment, the loss of his powers and his status as a spirit, and he was permanently banished to the center of the universe, also known as the overworld. And so when he awoke in the overworld, he was now just a shell of his former self. He was no longer an ancestral spirit, he was just a nameless entity with weakened powers. Anyways, he was still alive, but barely, and so he decided to put on some native robes to conceal his appearance of weakness. And with that, they began on their new mission, a mission of revenge. And it was because of that anger and desire for revenge that he was kept alive in his weakened state. However, even though Entity 303 still had lots of powers, he knew that he couldn't be using them just yet, as that would alert the spirits of his location. And if they knew exactly where he was, then the element of a surprise attack would be removed, which was what he wanted for his revenge. And as such, he hid in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to strike. But if he wanted to strike the spirits down, he first needed to lure them down to him. And so to do that, he caused quite a bit of destruction over the years. From possessing dinosaurs, forcing them to eat and destroy the atmosphere of the world that they lived on at that time, to giving a deadly zombie virus to a power-hungry group of native beings whose ambition in life was to kill off every other living being. Entity 303 was trying to do anything to get the spirits' attention. However, never would those spirits arrive in person, as they would just send meteors from the sky to kill the dinosaurs or give cures to the enemy teams. And so the entity began thinking that there was nothing he could do to get the spirits to visit in person. And so over the next billion years, Entity 303's powers would start to diminish, as his mission for revenge began to seem futile. Well, that was until one day when a strange new creature arrived on the overworld that had the power levels of that of the spirits. And that creature was the Herobrine. And so, thinking that this strange Herobrine creature had some sort of ties to the spirits, the entity prepared for an attack. This was going to be his chance for revenge. But there was a small problem. The Herobrine was constantly hiding in the shadows, which meant that there would be very few opportunities to attack. And also, when hiding in the shadows, the entity couldn't track the Herobrine. And so the entity would have to follow the Herobrine sightings and predict where he was next going to show up, so that way he could be primed for an attack. However, most of the time he was wrong in his predictions. With that being said though, there would be one time where he would be primed for an attack. However, because he didn't spend the time charging up an attack, the hits to the Herobrine were weak, and as such the Herobrine was able to fight back before disappearing into the fog. That was the last time that the entity ever saw the Herobrine, and now the entity was filled with regret. Regret of not charging up his attacks and losing his opportunity for revenge on the spirits. And so the entity was now forced to go back into the shadows, waiting for another spirit to arrive. And that's when you arrive. You remind the entity of the Herobrine, and as such he desperately wants to attack you, but he's unsure if he has the power yet, and he definitely doesn't want what happened with the Herobrine to happen again against you. So, knowing that he probably only has one shot at this, he decides to spend his time building up his power, all the whilst hunting you down from the shadows. But whilst doing that, he also wants to mess around with you, to test whether you are actually a spirit like the Herobrine, and so he does a few things to scare you away that only a real spirit would be able to persevere through. First, he summons lightning on and around you, something that could happen naturally, but very rarely actually would. And well, if that natural act didn't scare you away, perhaps an unnatural one might. And so the entity starts summoning TNT all around your builds, destroying them. And well, if that unnatural act doesn't scare you off, perhaps the sound of the entity might, as it calls out for you to make a wish. With the idea that if you aren't actually a spirit, you will make a wish, and the entity would stop attacking. But if you don't make a wish, you would have proved to the entity that you are a spirit, as only the spirit wouldn't be making a wish, because after all, they can already create anything that they want. And so it's then that the entity reveals himself to you, and at the same time his power levels have reached the maximum capacity and he attacks. Your world crashes in front of you, and the world and your power within it become the entity's possession. And with your powers, Entity 303 becomes unstoppable. But wait, there is one being that may be able to defeat him, and for that, you'll need to watch this video.